Hello, welcome to the Tech for Good podcast. We are very passionate about two things, technology and our world. In each pod, we will be interviewing some fascinating people, business leaders, but those with a special interest in solving the biggest issues facing humanity today. Think the environment, think healthcare provision during a pandemic, think global social injustice. If you want to know more about technology's immense potential to fix and transform, then you're in the right place. In this episode, I speak to Albane Bruyas, COO for Scaleway. One of Europe's leading cloud services providers, Scaleway is breaking new ground with some of the most advanced energy and water efficiency systems in the sector. In the interview, Albane talks about the technology behind sustainable data centers and tells us why Scaleway is calling for greater transparency about power usage in the industry at large. But first, I turn the spotlight on Albane and ask her how she would define her own leadership style.
Well, this is a tricky question actually, because talking about yourself is not always easy. But let's say for me, leadership is like having a vision and being able to make the transformation to enable this vision, let's say. So you have to have a vision of the long term, the path along, and then, of course, for a more personal thing, if I have to say, I think it's about humility. So at least my leadership is about humility, because I think if you are listening to the other ones, it's the way you enrich your ideas, and it's the way that you really understand what's happening in your teams, with your partners, and it's the best way to make sure that you enable this vision to become real, let's say, and for it to be constructed the way you wanted it. So yes, I would say that it's vision, password, and humility at all times.
Brilliant answer. Now, Albane, for business leaders today, how important do you think sustainability should be and is as a topic for those people at the very top of organizations?
Well, for me, just for us to make sure we understand each other, for me, sustainability, and I assume it's for you the same, it's not all about green and only environmental. You have all the society around it, the people you work with, it's really about what you want for your future, let's say. And so what you want for your future, being society, being employees, being the children that we have, it's of course something that a leader should have, because the leader is the one, as we just said, that should really have the long-term vision. So they're responsible of how our world is going to be. So yes, it has to be our biggest priorities at all time, to make sure we know where we go, and that's a sustainable world, and that's something that we will be proud of, let's say.
And moving it on to your company, Scaleway. Now, we cover the cloud industry a lot in the work that we do. We know it's obviously an incredibly interesting space right now. Tell us about Scaleway and how what you guys offer is different and more sustainable and from a green perspective than maybe what other companies in your industry are offering.
Well, first, we have to be clear. For the cloud, for us, it's really important to have in mind, or at least for me, it's really important to have in mind that cloud, we consider it as the raw material of the digital economy. So everything relies really on it when you talk about digital. Even though for the moment, many companies are not still in the cloud, they will go to it. And so, of course, sustainability is something that is mandatory. And we are working on this. And I think the specificity of Scaleway, or at least what we have to know about Scaleway about this, is really that we are a reliable company. Scaleway has like 20 years of existence. We are the only last independent European cloud provider, which is important also. And I think this independence is really important, because we build our cloud from the beginning, wanting it to be reliable, sustainable, sovereign, and all this. But also we had the capacity to do it, because we are not relying on investment funds and the risk that we need cash at absolute times. We have the chance to rely and be backed by Xavier Niel, which is one of the biggest investors in Europe. And he owns Iliad Group, to which we belong to. And this is giving us a great capacity to innovate, because when you rely on a group, which is not an investment fund, you have the great opportunity to let's say, to take risks on technology. So this enabled us to take risk on infrastructure technology. We have created an adiabatic systems that will be pleased to talk to you about afterwards. But on cooling, we have made some innovations. We were pioneer on bare metal. We are now pioneer on Apple M1 technology. And all these technologies, all this position on the technology is really what is making, I think, Scaleway really different from the other one. And this sustainable DNA, which is also what is really characterizing us, if I could say. I'm not sure in English is said that this way, but anyway, I hope the English people will understand me.
No, that's absolutely fine. Fully understandable. Yeah, it's that kind of green element that we're really interested in, Albane. And what are the kind of key programs of work in that area that Scaleway is doing at the moment?
Well, what is interesting about Scaleway is that we have the chance to manage all the value chain. This means that we develop our proper software, we manage completely our hardware, and we manage our infrastructure in the data center. So the programs that we have can have really a really wide scope thanks to this. And we are really working on each step of the value chain. So we work on the cooling systems. We work on the servers also, because well, the cloud market, it's all about servers. So how you innovate all the time to have the best performance for your customers, and at the same time, the less power consumption that you can have. And it's also something which is really important for me personally. I really work on this, is also the life cycle management of this hardware. You have some figures who tells you that most cloud providers use the hardware from 3 to 5 years. And the reality is that we work every day to make softwares, to make hardware, very special hardware, which enables us to use it from 7 to 10 years. And this is something that we are really proud of, because it's not only power consumption, it's also what you do with the hardware you buy. And of course, also, there is not only green, I just said it, and we have to talk about it. We really work a lot with non-profit organizations. We work with people, non-profit organizations for unemployed people, for young people, to train them, because our cloud data center world really interests young people, but there is no special sometimes trainings for it. So we take those young people and we train them in our data centers. We also, and this counts for me, of course, work a lot with 15 Tech, which helps, which has a goal to have 50% of women in tech, which is not really the fact today, and which is so important. And finally, we work with special organizations that we have in France, which are specialized for people with disabilities. And so we give them as most as we can, and they are specialized for one in particular. We gave them all our hardware that we cannot use after 7 or 10 years, and they re-employ it. And so it's a lot of work on this side of persons with disabilities, which is really interesting also. So it's really all the scope that we want to address to make sure that we are really sustainable and just not environmental way, let's say.
Hello, I'm Daniel Brigham, editor of Tech for Good magazine. I hope you're enjoying this podcast, and if you want more, you can head over to techforgood.net for some compelling and thought-provoking stories. From high-tech insect farms that could solve world hunger to a global mission to counter the spread of COVID-19 disinformation, we've got Tech for Good covered. You can read and subscribe at techforgood.net.
Do you feel like you've got a bit of a niche, almost a bit of a speciality in the cloud market with your kind of approach? It sounds like you do.
Yeah, it's really what we want to work on, and what we are working every day. We actually, to be honest, it was something that was really in the DNA of Scaleway from the beginning. And I'm here like in Scaleway since 2 years, and our CEO is here from 1 year. And what we realized when we came is that it was fascinating to see how much Scaleway was doing on the sustainability point of view, but was not communicating about it. So our goal today is really to show how much it's in our DNA, and we want to show people that there are cloud providers which are working this way, and that there is an option, let's say, that is possible with a catalog which is as brilliant as the other ones.
Brilliant, Albane. Now, you've spoken a little bit about this already, but let's talk about the technology in your data centers. What makes it different? What makes it special, and what makes it more efficient for you and your customers? Let's talk about the technology specifically.
Well, we can talk as much as we want. We love this subject because we're really proud of it. So, of course, like everyone, for us, it's a given. We power all our data centers with renewable energy. So this is a given. But then, in a few years ago, we have created a special way of cooling the data centers, which is really unique in the world, and which is resting on the adiabatic. So adiabatic is actually a human scientific fact, maybe you know about, is that water absorbs energy. Okay, so water absorbs the heat. And it's a bit like when you sweat, there is some water, and so you feel cold. And what we have done is transforming this for data center. So what our technology is to stop using air conditioning, always power energy, we use the same air and refresh it. And we take the advantage of having all the outside fresh air, which most of the time is the right temperature for a data center. And when it's too hot, then we use this adiabatic fact that water is taking the energy. And so we refresh air from outside and blow it in our data center. So this is great. This is great because it's using something which is really known everywhere. When we go out of the pool or when you are sweating, but we are now using it for a data center. And this gives us the opportunity. We have these great figures. We have 40% less of power consumption from a usual cooling system, and we have 90% less of water usage. So it's really great figures, and we really want to, well, let's say, hope that everyone on the market will try to find some sorts of innovation that will help to have the same figures.
Absolutely. And those figures are really quite impressive, aren't they? And it's, I guess, now I know Scaleway is trying to, or is calling for greater transparency in the industry as a whole around efficiency. Maybe tell us a bit more about that. What are you as a company trying to do to get that message out there a bit more?
Yeah, exactly. Actually, what we all know is that our goal is to use less power and less water, because of course it's energy that we need and it's finite. So we have to take care of it, let's say. But what we want today is to have really a transparency on this. And when we say transparency, it's a common metric with everyone, because and maybe we will have to explain what is PUE and WUE, so power usage effectiveness and water usage effectiveness. So if we take the example of power usage effectiveness, it's how many kilowatt you need to make a server of 1 kilowatt work. Okay, so this is really analyzing how the infrastructure of the DC data center is consuming power. And what we want is more transparency, because when we see data centers who tell us that they have 1-for-1 PUE, this is just not possible. This means there is no light in the data center, okay? So there is something which is not going well. So our goal is really to have one metric that is ISO certified, or anything that we make sure that everyone is based on the same metric, because it's important for the customers. And at a minimum, government should be interested in it, and they are in France being interested in it, but customers should be aware of what is happening. And so at Scaleway, we really call for a common metric based on ISO or based on anything that is common globally. And something else is that we would like to have the two really linked, because how some bad marketing can work. You only talk about PUE or you only talk about WE, and you can have an issue. Or whereas if you say we have this real data center efficiency and it's PUE plus WE, there is nothing you can hide, and you have a real visibility for your customers on what is the carbon footprint, what is the water footprint of what they use, of the product they are using, because they're interested in it. And to finish, to go on this and really to show the example, we are about leadership. Scaleway takes this leadership on environmental issues, and we are now giving to our customers the visibility of their carbon footprint for each of our offers, to make sure that they know exactly what is happening when they take one of our virtual machine, or I don't know, any product that they would like to have.
Excellent, Albane. And your passion for this and the company's passion is clear for all to see. But I want to get an honest answer from you on the challenge of this, because you often hear statistics about how much electricity the data center industry uses worldwide, and it's often like, wow, that's a lot of power. And obviously, the demand for data centers is going to grow. How difficult is it to imagine that being sustainable? Because you'd think as the data center market and the number of data centers, quite literally, it grows at an incredible rate worldwide. Like how is that going to be sustainable? How is that going to be efficient? How are we going to keep that to manageable levels, do you think?
Well, if I can say, your question is, I would divide it in two parts. There is the first part, which is when we say that data center activity grow, is that because you have less on-premise. Okay, so our vision and the figures that we can see this last few years is that actually the figures that we found is that they say that you save around 80%, 90% of power consumption when you go to on-premise or your computer at home to a data center, because of course it's optimized, because you have experts working all day to make sure you improve performance of the servers, performance of the infrastructure in the data center. So no, at first, only the scaling and moving all the data in a data center won't be the reason why we use more power. So I think it's more a global issue that we should all work on, which is the sobriety of our softwares and the needs that the use that we have for it. If you really use cloud, meaning you stop your virtual machine when you don't need it, if you really use this possibility that you have there, and if you really pay attention to the sobriety of your software, of your code, then this is where we are going to do some big effort also. So of course we have a big responsibility and we're working on it. But I think we have to understand that it's also experts that are managing this, and software should also, and people should also feel responsible for what's happening.
Do you want to keep up to date with the latest in enterprise, technology, and digital transformation? Visit digitalbulletin.com for news, long reads, thought leadership, and so much more. That's digitalbulletin.com.
And talking of responsibility, how much responsibility do you think the hyperscalers have, the big public cloud providers, AWS, Azure, or those types of companies, to not just ensure that their data centers are sustainable and efficient, but also marketing the fact that they are and being transparent as well?
Well, it's not for me to pass judgment on our competitors. It's not a position I want to be in, I see they are innovating also. I think the difficulty we will have in our market, and we have to pay attention to this, is that you have now, and this is why I was making the difference between the Scaleway and the rest of the cloud providers, is that we are now, for all the data centers, it's more real estate groups than cloud providers group who have the data centers. And this is maybe the dangerous side of the thing, because they are not as much responsible as we are, because we have all the value chain. So we have to show everything, and we know how everything works, and we know how to make everything work better together. So maybe this is the fact on which we should pay attention. The rest, what they are doing, AWS, Azure, or I don't know, let's say I'm sure they're working on it. And I'm confident that they find solutions. But anyway, take example on us and you will find a way. But I won't judge more than this.
That's a very respectable answer. I think we've answered some, or spoken of some quite heavy topics there, Albane. I'm interested now to talk a bit more about you and your kind of personal motivation in your career to work in this industry and try and play your kind of small part in making a difference for Scaleway. You obviously have that personal passion, don't you?
Yeah, honestly, when I joined Scaleway, and I'm working in operations since the beginning of my career, and in operations you have direct impact on your company environmental impact. You are the one who decide who are the freight forwarders, where do you buy, and the infrastructure of the data center, for example. So you have a direct impact. So it was important to me when I joined Scaleway to see that Scaleway had the values that I had and had really this sustainable vision. And this, and how do we say, thanks to this independency, well, they keep this sustainable DNA and they stick on it. Let's say they don't move from it. And so Scaleway was for me a great opportunity to join the technology, because before I was much more. I began my career in luxury, so it was really another world. And so but it was so tempting for me to join the raw material of our economy. I really feel it like this, because I may be too much a buyer because it was my first job. But anyway, we are the raw material, and we have the opportunity to work on this and to improve it. So this is really great. And to be more personal, I'm a mother. I have 2 little girls, and so making sure our environment, our society also, because I have 2 girls, so fit in tech is important for me. I want my girls to inclusive companies. I want sustainable companies. So yeah, it really fits to what I think, and I couldn't do this job without sticking really to the values of Scaleway.
Brilliant. It sounds like a great fit, Albane. And I know as well that you do some mentoring with startups. Maybe talk a little bit about that. It obviously says a lot about you as a person that you do that, and how often the topic of sustainability and sort of comes up when you're talking to those companies.
Well, most of the startups have sustainability in mind. It's not like 30 years ago. Now it's sustainability. We are talking about these leaders who want a better world. Yes, they have it in mind. I think the real question we have now with the startups today is not how much they want to be sustainable and to impact their world. It's much more how they are going to do it. How are we going to be tangible, let's say? Because we had a communication from our group a few weeks ago, and it has to be heard by everyone. It's expensive to be sustainable. Okay, it is expensive to be sustainable. So it's easier for big group like us than for little companies who are, startups. They have so much to do. When sustainability arrives and costs so much, yes, it is more difficult for them. So this is where we really have to help them and give them. And this is where the society and sustainability cannot be just the affair of one company. It has to be everyone. It has to be the government. We have to give them really the ecosystem, which makes sustainability feasible for little companies with less budget than we have.
Definitely. And it's been a great interview, Albane. And I want to finish kind of looking to the future. You're clearly very proud of what Scaleway stands for, and the company's values fit so well with you as well. How excited are you by what you could achieve as a kind of company going forward? You mentioned the work that you do with disadvantaged groups and organizations who normal cloud providers might not usually kind of work with. Maybe bringing that into the equation as well. How proud and excited are you about the path that you're on?
How proud? So much. Yeah. But I know also there is a lot to do. It's just like we are very proud of the path that we have and on what we are going to work in the few years. But I really want also to have people in mind, especially in Europe, as we are all. In Europe, we have now a subject which is data sovereignty. We all talk only about this nowadays, but what is really interesting is to understand that it's not only data centers, it's also hardware. So now everybody hears about semiconductors, but this is a reality, a geopolitical, but also an environmental reality. Because when people discover now that we are so much semiconductors in Asia or in US, the reality that when it's in Asia, when you have your manufacture, your production in Asia, this means you ship to Asia from Europe, okay? So it's also important for us to know that there is so much to do and we have to do it together, which is not so simple in Europe, but we have to do this. Put all the European people and companies together to really build something and being sovereign, also on the manufacturing, we have a big chance in Europe is that we have more and more carbon neutral power. All our countries are making a lot of efforts everywhere. And this is something very important because we are only, I don't know if you have this in England, but we are talking about the scope 1 and scope 2 and 3 for environmental impact. You always talk about scope 1, which is how much of power that your data center is using power. But if you don't look at the power scope 2 and 3, which is how is the power for manufacturing and how is the energy for shipping, then you miss a lot. And this is what we have to work tomorrow. And this is where I'm really happy to be in the operation sides, because this is really our subject of tomorrow. Where are the semiconductors? What can we do and manufacture in Europe, making sure we save a lot of carbon expenses, let's say, from all this shipping and all this importation that we have. So yeah, this is really the future we have to look on for me.
That was the Tech for Good podcast. Listen, subscribe, and rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher.